Planning Commission, you are live and ready to broadcast.
All right, I'd like to call to order the Planning Commission meeting of Thursday, November 5th, 2020. Let's start off with roll call, please.
Yes, Chair Dennison.
Here.
Commissioners Dallas.
Here.
Butt.
Here.
Hefner.
Here.
And Spears.
All right, with that, I would like an motion for approval of the agenda.
Also move.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Next up, we have a report out from the closed session. Deputy City Attorney.
Thank you, Chair. The Planning Commission met in closed session to discuss anticipated litigation under Government Code Section 54956.9, Subdivision D2. No reportable action was taken.
Thank you. Next up, appointment of vice chair. We need a vice chair to serve a partial term between now and June of 2021. Is there anybody who would like to volunteer before I volunteer somebody who hasn't already served? I couldn't hear you, Bill. Are you volunteering?
Not necessarily. Who has? Am I the only one who hasn't served as a vice chair since I'm back on after 12 years?
No, I think Commissioner Dallas, I had assumed at some point you had already served as vice chair of the commission, but hearing that you haven't,
Well, I have at one time, but not in this session. I've been chair and vice chair, but so is Bob. I don't know, maybe more than once.
yeah.
But let's not pick on poor Peggy, huh?
Yes. Commissioner Dallas?
I prefer Bill Pesner.
Okay.
Are you amenable to serving another partial term for us?
Sure.
Commissioner Petner?
Sure, I guess so.
All right. Do we have a motion as such?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next up on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Are there any edits people would like?
I have one edit on line 88. It's quoting me, but it was actually Vice Chair Catalano. So that should be changed.
That was my one edit as well. Any other edits? Can I get a
Okay,
motion?
I will move approval with that one change.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next up is the council liaison report. Is the mayor here tonight?
I'm just letting him in here. There he is. He's connecting to audio.
Perfect timing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are ready for the liaison report.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't really have a report. I mean, you guys have the letter that was sent. And if there's any questions about that, I'm happy to answer, but I think it's pretty clear that we're just looking for, recommendation from the Planning Commission that is consistent with the direction that we've given. So if there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Any questions from any commissioners?
Did I miss the letter? What letter?
Included in the packet
Oh, okay. I'll look for it. Thank you.
under parking.
All right.
Well, I guess we can ask more questions when we cover this, right? Because it's in regard to the last item.
Yes.
Okay, I'll save everything.
Okay, I am not going to stay on for the whole meeting. I'll stay on for another half an hour. So, so if there's questions, I'll answer them. If not, then I think the letter speaks for itself, but go ahead.
Well, yeah, as long as you're not going to be there, because it's going to require some explanation. And I mean, I don't want to get into direct conflict, but I after reading John Hutt's evaluation in their letter, it's like I think we're diametrically opposed. The issue hasn't been resolved, and my biggest question is why things were done at the last minute, and we didn't even see the changes, and I didn't even know about them until I saw John Hutt's letter. And,
So-
That's
and
the
I'm,
reason why the commission or the city council has given the commission the opportunity to review that information. The matter was pulled from the city council agenda. So the city council has not had the opportunity to review it further either.
I didn't hear all that necessarily, but I mean, it seemed like it happened within the last week of things, and I got the letter, and until I saw the letter, I didn't even know there was any submission since we had already submitted our findings to the city council, that there was any changes made by staff. So maybe you can say that again. I didn't really hear it, Vince. Sorry.
So essentially, we pulled the matter from their agenda and we referred it back to the planning commission so they have the opportunity to listen to new information that was proposed by staff. That's what we're going to be doing for the last agenda item this meeting.
Right. Well, what I'm getting at is that if that hadn't happened, I guess the question is, what would have the council have done if John hadn't written a letter in the interim?
The council would have the opportunity to review multiple resolutions and be able to deliberate and make up their mind how they wanted to proceed with that.
And
Okay. Well,
Commissioner
Yeah, go
Pepper,
ahead.
we can talk.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, we can talk about it. I don't think the mayor has all that background, so we can talk about what happened between the planning commission recommendation and it going to council during that agenda item later on. I'll answer that question for you.
Okay. Okay. That's fine. Thank you.
Is this the last meeting that you will be our liaison, Mr. Mayor?
I think so. The next planning commission meeting, will
Is
that
November
be
19th?
November 19th? So I will be on that meeting as well, yeah, because
Okay.
we're going to install the new council on what, is it December
Third,
10th? December 3rd? Oh, okay.
So we've got one more meeting. All right, great. Any other,
rather, it's city council would be, yeah, that would be a meeting, the first meeting in December, but it's not the third.
all right. Any other questions or comments for our liaison? All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next up is community input. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning an item that is not on the agenda. The commission welcomes your virtual attendance and participation. When addressing the commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 5 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. Copies of the agenda are available for your convenience online. State legislation, Government Code Section 54954.2 limits the commission's ability to take action on specific requests. Government Code Section 54954.2 limits the placement of items on the agenda for action 72 hours prior to meetings, except for specific findings. No actions or discussion may be undertaken by the Planning Commission on any item if not posted on the agenda, except the commissioners or staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed by the public, or a commissioner or staff liaison may ask a question for clarification or make a brief report on his or her own activities. A commissioner or the commission itself may provide a reference to staff to report back to the commission at a subsequent meeting concerning any matter or may direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. Do we have anybody waiting to provide comment?
You do not have any callers for comment at this time.
Great. If somebody does show up in the next minute or two, go ahead and let us know, please.
Will do.
All right. Next up on the agenda is public hearing number 1, design review permit 19-10 for 170 West Montecito Avenue. Is there a presentation from staff?
We do have a staff presentation, which includes a PowerPoint presentation from Assistant Planner Josh Wolf.
Good evening, Commissioners. Tonight, the Commission will be reviewing Design Review Permit 1910. This is in conjunction with Second Unit Permit 19-13. It's for 170 West Montecito Avenue. And tonight, the Design Review Permit will be contemplating for the construction of an aggregate floor area in excess of 3,000 square feet on an R3 zone. The construction will include an addition of a total of 1,654 square feet to the first and second story of a single-family residence that alters the facade and adds habitable floor area at the rear. There will also be a accessory structure built for garage as well as the accessory dwelling unit. Project location here on Montecito, close to the corner of Hermosa Avenue, just above the boulevard. Directly north of the old North Church at the parking lot, east and west of R3 zoned lots, and surrounded by commercial uses. The project proposes adding to the first floor 858 square feet from an existing 900 square feet. To the second floor, we have 796 square feet added from 858, and the garage itself being 516 square feet, for a subtotal here of 3,376 square feet. This is the gross floor area we'll be looking at today. There is an additional area provided here for the porch of 158 square feet, but because it is not enclosed by walls, it is not counted as floor area per the definition as defined in 17.08 of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code. And just to point out that that is actually unlike our municipal code definition of gross floor area of single-family residential, but it would be excluded under that code by that definition anyway. I'm also pointing out here the second unit is 800 square feet, and as a grand total, that would be 4,334 square feet. So we have photos of the property here at the north elevation. We have existing wood shingles here you can see at the west elevation covering the side entrance, which appears to be in need of some attention and love there. And at the south elevation, we have quite an extensive deck that is to be demolished and rebuilt, as well as where the addition will be located. And at the east elevation, again, you can see some of the shingles there, kind of worn out, that will be replaced and repaired. As for the neighborhood analysis, it provided more inconclusive insight because the data presents a variety of not only uses but structure types. Additionally, the data included the Kensington facility and the Old North Church, which were commercial uses. Even minus those, we have other R3 properties in this in the residential portion of this that contain single-family residences as well as multifamily residences. So in terms of the summary for the project information, we have a lot of code compliance here, but just to point out right away, I did indicate no on the second floor setback requirement. where it is required 25 feet, it is existing as 20 feet, but there is no change other than material change to this elevation. All other portions of the project are compliant. So here I'm outlining that, I'm highlighting again that we have the non-compliant second floor setback from the front, but however, pursuant to Sierra Madre Municipal Code 17-28040, preservation and renovation of existing single-family of quality design is encouraged. And where homes are preserved, the commission can consider some relaxation of setbacks and other zoning requirements for developments that incorporate existing units, providing that the development is not materially detrimental to adjoining properties. And I would also like to point out that the project also contemplates reduction of nonconformity by providing a two-car covered garage where there is not an existing parking garage at all. So here we have the existing site plan, and as you can see towards the left of the slide, there's a lot of open space room for building. We can see here, let me get my pointer up if I can find it. So we have the wood deck here at the center of the property. This is going to be demolished and replaced with the area of the addition as well as a brand new deck. And here, as I pointed out earlier, there's a lot of open space area. There are 2 citrus trees proposed to be removed for the location and siting of the garage and accessory dwelling unit. And moving on, as you can see, we have the accessory structure here at the rear of the property, with the garage here at the end of a newly constructed permeable paver driveway. And we can see that the replacement of that deck at the rear is by addition to the residence as well as a new wood deck. And I'd also like to point out that the existing front porch is going to be enclosed for living space, and then added on to that is a full width front porch. So here we have the existing first floor. It's also a demo plan. It's a little bit hard to see, so what I will just kind of try to describe this. What's being retained here is the bedroom, bathroom, stairs here, and portions of the living room. And basically this whole wall here will be demolished to make room for the addition. Kitchen here is going to be completely new, and the laundry here is going to be completely reconfigured. So as you can see, beginning with the living room, we have an expansion towards a more open concept floor plan with the addition of a dining room and family room. We have the addition of a powder room here, pantry in conjunction with the reconfiguration of the laundry room. This also encloses the side entrance here. And then we have the all-new kitchen, and at the rear we have the new deck with the new stairs down to grade. At the front we have the foyer that was enclosure of the existing porch, and then at the front facade we have the new porch at full width. From the second floor, most of what we see here is going to be retained. Bedroom here is going to stay existing. Bathroom here will be enlarged, and the attic space will be converted for use as a bedroom. So here you can see this is expanded. The seating area here you can see is popped out, and the bathroom here was enlarged here to provide for sink space, and then the majority of the addition at the second floor here is for a master suite. Our north elevation shows existing here with a very large roof and a dormer pop out for the bedroom at the second floor. And here is our new proposed north elevation with material changes here being stucco removed and replaced with vertical board and batten siding, shingles to horizontal siding, which you can kind of see here, and new windows to match in style with existing. So there will be all new windows and all new doors. Style is going to match existing style, but it will also be all comprehensively new, especially where there's for those additions to match. And just a color rendering sample of that. From the west elevation, this is going to show the most dramatic change we have here at the front. You can't see the porch here, but that will be expanded upon. Here we can see a deck, and the elevation actually would continue this deck a little further. Our proposed elevation here expands upon that. So from the front, we can see the expansion of that front porch here. There is a gable end. And at the rear, we have that entire second floor expansion along with the first floor expansion. And just a colored rendering of that elevation. Our existing south elevation, again, we're going to be replacing materials here, stucco here, full demolition of this porch, and entire removal of this wall. And as you can see, we have a new facade at this side. This will be a new porch entering onto the family room with the kitchen on the left and master suite on above on the second floor. And just a colored rendering of that. Our east elevation, similar to the other side, here is where the living room is located. And here's where the existing porch is located, which will be enclosed. And of course, we have the full addition to the rear, along with the new deck showing, and the front porch expansion. And this space will be the dining room, and beyond will be the family room. Above here is the attic space converted bedroom from attic space. And just a colored rendering of that. So we have some cross sections here just to demonstrate the raised foundation. And another cross section here, more towards the south. And I will also point out that the portion of this addition is 27 feet in height from grade to ridge of this roof. It actually is below the existing ridge of the roof, but because the grade changes here, it exhibits a greater height, which is compliant with R3 code, allowing for total 30 feet height. And here we have the floor plan for the garage and ADU. Garage will accommodate for 2 covered spaces, and the ADU is compliant with the standards, providing for bedroom space, kitchen space, and bathroom. Here we have elevations. This is the north elevation with entrance to the garage. Door on the right of that elevation with a garage door on the right of that elevation with the entrance to the EDU at the center. West elevation showing here. East elevation on the bottom right of the slide, and then south elevation to the bottom left of the slide. And then just some colored renderings to show that all materials will be consistent with the design of the main building. Some more detail to the materials being used. We have vertical board and batten siding. This is a more saturated blue. They're calling it evening blue. Board and batten hardy board siding. Horizontal siding that is used below the gables will be a hardy plank lap siding, a little less saturated than the vertical board and batten. And for our roof material, we have timberline. It's a more gray slate colored composition shingle. And for our trim around windows, posts, and fascia board, we have Dunn Edwards white color here. Doors at the front of the residence and of the ADU are divided light solid core wood doors, and then windows will all be either fixed or single hung, and I believe they are vinyl windows. Here we have some 3D renderings to demonstrate more of what the project would look like. Front elevation showing open gable and front porch. And to the side here we have, this is the rear where the deck would be opening into the family room. This is, here on this part is the living room. And then here we see more of the deck and its relation to the grade. And on the bottom right, we have the other side here, showing the extension of the addition. So to make findings for the design review, the proposed project is consistent with the general plan designation of residential medium high density, and that the proposed project preserves and enhances the existing single family home. The majority of the project is located at the rear and will not unreasonably interfere with the use, position, and enjoyment of surrounding and adjacent properties. The proposal at the front will enhance the residential character of the neighborhood. The height, bulk, scale, mass, and siting of the proposed project is compatible with the existing neighborhood, landforms, and surroundings, in that the neighborhood contains a variety of uses and structure types. The proposed single-story project reflects the scale of the neighborhood and does not visually overpower nor dominate the neighborhood, and is not ill-proportioned. The proposed project being 27 feet in height neither unreasonably interferes with public views or the views and privacy of neighbors, nor does it produce unreasonable noise level or cause material adverse impacts. The proposed project exhibits a comprehensive farmhouse style around all elevations of both structures, and each structure is consistent in style. The proposed project is not seeking relief from development standards, so finding 7 does not need to be made. Additionally, because this is an R3 zone property, I believe finding 8A through F does not apply. Tonight, the Commission can approve Design Review Permit 19-10 pursuant to Planning Commission Resolution 20-17. They can approve the Design Review Permit with modifications. They can deny the Design Review Permit, identifying the findings that the Planning Commission feels cannot be made, and for the basis for rejecting those findings. Or the Planning Commission can continue the project and provide staff and the applicant with direction. Staff recommends the Planning Commission take the following action: approve Design Review Permit 19-10 pursuant to Planning Commission Resolution 20-17 with attached conditions. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff?
Yeah, I have a question on the code compliance with floor area. I don't understand how we're finding this to be code compliant when the maximum floor area allowed is under 3,400 square feet, but the project is over 4,000.
So my understanding is that the gross floor area, if I can go back to one of the first slides here. Oops. So we're looking at the main structure here of 3,376. That includes the accessory detached garage. That's 3,376, and our allowable floor area is only 1 square feet above that. So that portion of the project is within development code standards. However, the portion that exceeds that, which I don't believe would be contemplated, is the front porch and second unit, or accessory dwelling unit, as it's now called.
Well, why are we not counting the ADU? Our code is very clear that the ADU has to be within the square footage. If you look at code section 1722.050A, which in the second unit ordinance, it says the total floor area of all buildings on the lot, including the accessory dwelling unit, shall not exceed the maximum floor area otherwise allowed in accordance with this tile. So we
my
have
understanding.
I can answer that question, actually. So because,
Go right ahead. Thank you.
so under the state ADU law, subdivision E, it says that, oh, my lights turned off. It says that projects that are within 800 square feet or less, ADUs that are within 800 square feet or less, will be approved without regard to underlying zoning conditions. In this case, the project is 800 square feet, so it meets the subdivision E requirement. So we can't prejudice the project by applying that zoning standard. Let me go turn on that light.
Well, that's not my understanding, but I'll take your word for it. But the issue here is that the floor area that's allowed under the R3 code gives a bonus for the second unit. So if you're not counting the second unit at all, then you would use the floor area for just a single family home, which is a 35% number, and the maximum allowed would be 2,955. Which is less than 3,376. So you can't get a bonus for including a second unit and then not count the second unit. I mean, that just defies logic.
Josh, do you want to respond to that, or Jay?
Okay, so my understanding is that the code, what you're saying is that because it's tier 1.5 is what you're saying, but if we're not considering the floor area for this, it would only fall under tier 1.
Yes.
Okay. So if tier 1.5 does not apply, then yes, this would be above that floor area allotment. So we can move forward with that understanding and still, let's see, we can still apply 17.28.040 for the preservation of an existing single-family unit if you want to contemplate considering the relaxation of that zoning requirement.
Are there other questions of staff? Would the applicant like to make a presentation?
No, not at this moment. I think, well, I'm the designer, Ricardo Figueroa. I think Josh pretty much explained everything that we're planning to do. I don't know if the homeowner has a comment.
Hello, I'm Lynette, the owner of 170 West Montecito. For the most part, we've been in the process trying to get this design and following every request that the city have asked us for the past 3 years. And we followed through closely with Josh, and from what we were told, we are within the zoning code. So I don't know what else is needed for us to move forward, but just we'd like a recommendation. We'd like the support from the city that we can move forward with this project, being that we've complied and followed through the city's guidelines and the zoning. I know multiple changes have made with this zoning, and that took us 3 years to get through this point tonight. Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions of staff for the applicant from any of the commissioners? All right, At this time, I think we need to open this up for public comment. Was there any public comment, Director Gonzalez, on this particular project? If there was not any public comment at this time, we will go ahead and open up.
You do have a caller in the queue for verbal comment.
Perfect.
Give me
At
1
this
second
time,
while I patch
anybody
them
who
through.
wants to address the Planning Commission concerning this particular item, the call-in number is now on the screen. A reminder that we can only discuss this particular item that is on the agenda, and we ask that you open up your comments with your name and address for the record. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna patch the caller in 1 second. Good evening, caller. Please state your name and city of residence for the record. If you're watching this meeting live, please mute your TV to avoid feedback with the public comment feed.
Name and address for the record.
Caller, are you there? All right, I'm gonna patch the caller in 1 second. Caller? Good evening, caller. Please state your name and city of residence for the record. If you're watching this meeting live, please mute your TV to avoid feedback with the public comment feed.
All right. Seems as if
The caller appears to be having technical difficulties.
Hello?
Hi, hello, you are live for public comment.
Hello?
Yes, you are live for public comment.
Hello? Am I on?
Yes, you are on. Go ahead.
Oh. Thank you. This is, I am on. Hello?
Yes, we hear you. Go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay. Thank you. This is Deb Sheridan. And first of all, I want to know why this is not being televised tonight. I was watching my TV till 10 after 7. I finally went onto the computer, frantically tried to get in to comment on items not on the agenda, and it was too late by the time I punched all the numbers in. So here I am. And I would appreciate it if you gave me 1 minute to say what I wanted to say. Well, I'll take that as a yes. This is, so as I said, I'm Deb Sheridan. I live on Valley Vista Drive. I am representing the Preserve Sierra Madre Steering Committee. And once again, I would like to know why this is not being televised tonight. First of all, though, I would like to thank you, Planning Commission, for what you are doing for Sierra Madre. After the October 27th City Council meeting, there are several concerns that we do have. Applicants will now go to staff if they need a conditional use permit. What do you see as the role of the Planning Commission going forward? Staff will be approving the majority of the applications, like the 3 before you tonight. Will you receive notification of what applications are approved? What are the criteria of those to be forwarded to your committee for your consideration? We would suggest you ask council to agendize this and to make sure your commission receives every application given to staff, whether it is approved or not. As there will be 3 new city council members, we would also like you to ask the new city council to reconsider having 7 members on your commission. The plan when the council took 2 commissioner positions away in July was to agendize this in May. But we are respectfully asking that it be agendized earlier, even in January, because our 3 new council members have been paying close attention to the issues at hand, and it looks like they're going in being very knowledgeable, which is a good thing. Anyway, thank you so much again for all that you do in keeping Sierra Madre the wonderful town that it is. And I'm going to ask for a third time, why is this not on TV tonight? Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you for your comment.
Commission, to answer the caller's question, we did seem to have a glitch with the Channel 3 feed. The live stream on our website was up and running, but the Channel 3 feed did not go live when we went live with the live stream. But we have that resolved, and Channel 3 is now live as well.
Great. We appreciate your diligence on getting that live for the public. And we appreciate everybody's patience with hearing the public comment out of order. Are there any callers on the line that are still there to speak about this particular project?
We do have one more caller in queue that called in the last minute or two. I will let them in now.
Thank you.
Good evening, caller. Please state your name and city of residence for the record. If you are watching this meeting on TV or on your computer, please mute the feed to avoid feedback. You may begin with your public comment.
It's David Gordon, and I'm not quite sure where we are on the agenda. Are we on the general public comment?
We've passed the general public comments, but as there were technical difficulties in calling in earlier, we're accepting public comment at this time.
Okay, right. Okay, then, so public comment, David Gordon, Fairview Avenue, Sierra Madre. And I, too, concerned about the bad relations that seem to exist between council and the planning commission. I know people on council, I know people on the planning commission, and I know them to be good, hard-working people. So it is somewhat confusing to me and disturbing why there is this situation where council issues guidelines and instructions to the planning commission. The planning commission seems to work very hard and do a lot of detailed work, and then they send it back, and then staff advises council that this doesn't meet the instructions given, that the instructions are rather general, like reduce regulation. And then, so council then issues more guidelines and gets more upset and goes back to the planning commission, and the planning commission gets more and more upset with council. And as member of the planning commission, Bob Spears, said at the council meeting last week, we just don't know where we stand. We don't know how to go about it. So this is not good, and I think one could wait for the new council to see whether that improves matters, but I think it's up to this council and this planning commission to try and resolve the situation. And I think the problem is the mechanism here, that the planning commission meets it in bubble, and then the council meets in a different bubble, and they don't talk to each other. So I would urge that the planning commission requests a joint meeting with council and with the staff present, where everybody can argue out their position and in open forum, so we can discuss it. The situation, because of the last three issues, parking and the commercial code and design review, have all ended up with the planning commission's unanimous recommendations being overturned by council. This is not good. I can't believe that some accommodation couldn't be found if there was open discussion and debate. Maybe this is rather unfashionable view that discussion and debate might lead to some kind of compromise. So I very much urge that the two sides sit down together and try and thrash out the remaining issue, which is parking. Now on parking, I know it's on the agenda for later on, but what's on the agenda is either the planning commission view or the staff view. And so what I have to say is on neither of those two things. It's that they consider a much more radical proposal, which is that since we know that in Sierra Madre there is in fact no problem with parking, you simply abolish all of these parking regulations, and having 6 spots here or in lieu there, just sweep the whole lot of it away and do away with parking requirements for commercial premises. And then you do away with all the bureaucracy, you do away with all the reasons why people can complain about not getting able to do business easily in Sierra Madre. And it's a simple solution. It's much more radical than either council or the Planning Commission is doing. The Planning Commission, if it been asked to do away with regulation, might have come up with it, but they weren't. They were asked to reduce regulation. So there we are. A plea for both parties to get together with staff in open forum and discuss the things together. I know everybody can be quite reasonable and can find a solution. And secondly, that on parking, we take a much more radical position. Thank you very much for hearing me out, and I look forward to following some of the rest of the meeting on the television. Bye-bye.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other callers?
That was your last caller for public comment at this time.
All right. With that, I will bring the matter back before the commission. Is there a commissioner that wants to start?
I can start. I visited the site today and I met with Mrs. Del Campo, and I talked to the neighbor next door that wrote the note, John Newell, walked the site. Given its location up against the commercial and the size of the lot and the way the massing is, I really don't have much problem with the scale of this project in that location. And if the exception that the preservation ordinance gives for a little extra square feet, I'm okay with that. So, that's it.
Thank you.
I'll go.
Go ahead.
So the issue is the impact on the adjoining properties, and the house on the east at 168 is set way back on their lot. And we've already heard from that occupant. They sent us a written communication that they're okay with it. And the applicant has not put a lot of windows at the rear of that east side. So they've taken that into, I assume that they took that into consideration. The house on the west side, on the other hand, is at the very front of their lot. But from their point of view, they're not going to see a whole lot of difference between what exists now and what will be developed. To the rear of this property is a parking lot for the church, so that there is no one behind there or at the back who's going to be impacted. So it's a rather long lot. I think it's like 147 feet deep. And so the property going to the back of the lot, I think, will be out of sight and will not have a great impact. It's below the height requirement. I think at the end of the day, it's going to improve that piece of property and the neighborhood generally. It's going to add a covered garage, which it doesn't have now, and it's going to add additional housing. So I can make the findings.
Thank you. Commissioner Pevsner or Hutt?
I can go. I don't have a lot of heartburn with the design on this project, but I just can't get past the floor area issue that we have. I looked at the state law that the deputy city attorney mentioned, and it says we can't deny the ADU, which we shouldn't, but it doesn't mean we have to allow the square footage for the house because they're adding to the house. And so we're talking about going over the floor area limit by almost 25%. There's another application on our agenda tonight that has a handful of square footage over and has a difficult lot. I just don't see that here. And so I can't support this project. I think that exemption, you know, for varying from the standards is to be used when you're going over a little bit and there's a really good case. And here we're going almost 25% over the floor area limit. And that the rear of this house could very easily be trimmed down in size to accommodate that. So I just can't get on board for that level of deviation on this project.
Commissioner Pevsner?
Yeah, actually, I'm aligning more with Peggy. I mean, I understand John's objections to it. I suppose it could be cut down, but they spent a lot of work on this, and the massing of the house is behind it, and it's a big improvement to the lot. And I don't think it encroaches or has any interference with either the other projects or in the rear as well. So I actually could support it.
It gives me pause, the amount of space that's being added in light of the codes that are there. One of the things that was brought up in conjunction with the changes to design review were specifically inclusive and mentioned the fact multiple times that gross floor area is what protects the city and keeps it in the size that it is. And so it gives me pause from that perspective. I think that every lot has unique challenges, advantages, and disadvantages. This one backs up to a parking lot. And so I don't think that adding massing at the back of a lot that's backed up to a parking lot it is a terrible problem. The neighbor, everything is behind, peering into the neighbors on either side. So I think that there are enough non-precedent setting items here that can be an exception as to why this particular lot I can get behind. So with all of that, are there any motions to be made?
I have a question.
Yes.
As an architect, I took off my planning commission hat at the site. I think can I do that and talk to him just as an architect about the master bedroom not having a window on the east side. There's just this long blank wall. If they wanted to add a window to the plan we approve, would that be a problem with the approval?
Can I make a comment?
Well, actually, I think what her question was is, did any of the commission have a problem if we gave them that permission? Is that what you were asking?
Well, that, but also, is it a planning commission issue if we approve the project as it is, just in general on a project, and they wanted to add a window, would that mean they'd have to come back to the planning commission just as a process thing?
We can specify that. It has to be substantially conforming to the plans that are approved, but we could specify that we're okay with adding a window here. So if they did add a window there, we would consider that to be conforming and there would be no need to bring it back.
Oh, okay.
So
we can mention it.
We could, but where is, I'm trying to pull up.
It's on the east elevation, the second floor addition.
What page in the packet is that?
Good question.
Try to ask the good ones.
Interesting, because I thought that there was no windows there in consideration to the neighbor whose house is set so far back.
And that's what I wanted to look at. That's why I was asking.
I don't know what sheet, it's sheet A51, but I don't know where it is in the packet.
Yeah, A51 is great. I can find it. Thank you.
So I talked to the owner about that, and I talked to the neighbor on the east side, and my understanding was everybody was cool with it. But you know.
Okay, so this is, so the master bedroom faces to,
It's on the, faces south, but it also has a wall that faces east that has no windows on it right now.
yeah, so it faces east and it's up there.
Second floor addition on the east elevation.
Yep.
It's blank.
Well, are there any commissioners that have objection to allowing a window there?
We've heard from that neighbor that they're okay with the development. I assume that there's a relationship there, you know.
Well, I'd like to hear, I think there was something about them eliminating windows on that side to give the neighbors some privacy. I would like to hear maybe from, just from the architect he wanted to add something, because that's what I wanted to hear what he had to say.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't do any windows there because of the proximity to the neighbor. We didn't want to have us look into their yard because they're a little bit lower. They're a 1-story. So that's the reason why we didn't do it. And also, can I add also in regards to the square footage for the house? We actually had a smaller footprint before. And at the recommendation of Josh, we increased our square footage at the last minute based on his recommendation. But we did have a smaller floor plan at one time. And so, but the window issue, I mean, we could add it. You know, it's not a code issue. We meet all our ventilation and air requirements and light requirements. But if it's something you guys want, we could add it. Then we'll change it around. Yeah.
I think it's probably up to the client, but it certainly would seem to make the space nicer. And the problem the commission would have with a window on the side would be with an existing building. Unless you were just going to put a wall of windows where you could not build a building over there because of the windows, you know.
No, John said.
And I talked to the owners today too, and we mentioned that maybe we do a clerestory window that can go over the bed. That way we don't have intrusion towards the neighbor. So that's also an option.
May I say something? I'm sorry, we're the owner.
Yeah,
I think the lady that came to the house, I mean, I really appreciate her for bringing things into perspective. I mean, I think we are in good relationship with our neighbors in general, left, right, front, back. So I would like the idea that if we were to move forward, if we have your approval, your blessing to move forward with this design, but with the inclusion of, if we were to plan to put a window there, if we can afford to put a window there, because a lot of our project is based, or the design is based on the money that we have. So if we were to put a window there, which is not a bad idea, will that affect, or do we have to come back again? And I guess we're hearing that we don't have to, that John said that we could write an inclusion or something that if we decide to add the window, that we don't have to come back to the design review again, that we can move forward with that.
You would be able to move forward, and the commission, if they so chose, could put this as a condition of approval.
Put the option of a window as a condition of approval, because I don't want to force them into a window.
So you can as an option, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I guess I would just want, I mean, if we're going to add that, I would just want it to be somebody to look at that, so that the director would review that it's not, you know,
an
intrusion into the neighbors. Okay. Which is, when we look at plans, we look at all of the plans, and part of why we've said all the things we've said about this is that you were conscientious in your design, and there weren't any of those concerns. So to give you a blank ticket to put a window in there without knowing size, shape, or view is a little further than we probably want to do, but I'm perfectly happy with giving that oversight to the director. I think that he does a fine job of that. So is that something that's amenable to the commission? Well, we don't have a motion yet. So when there's a motion, if somebody wants to add that, then that would probably be the right place.
I'll make a motion to approve with the cited additions.
What? What edition?
The window.
Your permissive agenda of the adding a window if it meets their needs.
Meets their needs and subject to the director's approval.
Right.
That's right. I'll second that, whatever that was.
Perfect. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
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 All those opposed?
No.
All right. Motion carries 4 ayes and 1 nay. Thank you.
One comment. It seems like they're for the applicant, you're okay. We're not going to make a comment about your application. But it looks like the process in terms of square footage and allowances and how much you can grant with 17.28.040 and the addition or non-addition of the ADU square footage, I think needs to get resolved, because it sounds like the staff is on one sheet of music and we are on another. And it goes back to some of my previous comments about the disconnect between the commission and staff. So just for future reference, I think that if staff wants to make these decisions, that they should at least provide the background for the decision as part of their report. In other words, if the square footage is X, Y, or Z, and it is this way because we believe in however you came up with the logic.
Yeah, I have a suggestion. Josh, if you wouldn't mind reaching out to Commissioner Hutt and getting in writing what Commissioner Hutt was articulating earlier, and then we can review that when it's in writing collectively as staff, and we can provide Commissioner Hutt feedback and provide the commission with feedback in writing too. I think that'd be the best way to go about it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
All right. Great. Thank you, everybody. Next up, design review permit 20-04 for 615 East Orange Grove Avenue. Staff.
So we do not have a PowerPoint presentation for this project, and the applicants are also not present for this meeting. This is a project that we are also looking at the interpretation that if it is a brand new construction, single family residence with a detached ADU up to 800 square feet, that this project would fall under the development classification by through the Housing Accountability Act, and it would be approved by right. And if the city attorney can also further discussion on this matter, it would be appreciated.
All right, thank you, Director Gonzalez. So this project is a housing development project as defined under the Housing Accountability Act. As a result, the city attorney's office has opined that it wouldn't be subject to discretionary review standards that have to be made in order to approve a design review permit. Now, the options before the Planning Commission are as follows. One, they can continue this project and get further direction from the City Council whether they want the Planning Commission to review projects for design without actually being able to issue a design review permit. Or B, the option is that we can approve this project ministerially. As I think through it, given we don't know when the City Council can meet to agendize this project, it might be best, or at least the time being, to approve this project ministerially and to put on the City Council's agenda on some future agenda to let them know that this should be an item for discussion.
Okay, so for those of us without the nuanced legal mind that you possess, when you say a ministerial approval, that doesn't require approval from this board, correct?
Correct. So ministerial approval just means if the project has met all the objective findings, all the objective standards under the municipal code, which as I understand from Director Gonzalez, it has, then it would be for Director Gonzalez to approve.
So then you don't need any action from us.
No.
I have a question. Would the neighbors, how would the neighbors weigh in on their response to this project?
The neighbors, well, I guess when the application is submitted, is there any, I have to ask Director Gonzalez this question. Is there any notice that has to be published if it's going to be approved ministerially going forward, I mean?
We would still send out notification to property owners. They would have the ability to view plans. We would do this now online before people would be able to come into the office. And there's also an appeal period. They would be able to submit an appeal if they so desired.
Is this the appeal that's going to cost $500 that the city council wants to implement?
That is one of the proposals by the city council that was suggested, yes.
So currently, to come to us does not cost $500 for a citizen to make a appeal. But for this one, if somebody wants to appeal it, it's going to cost them $500.
Correct. The current appeal fee is actually $3,750.
Isn't that the fee that would apply in this? Because it's under the current law, right?
Yes.
But why would we allow appeal if there's no, you know what, that's above my pay grade.
No, you're right. You're right.
No, the appeal is just based on whether it meets code. It's not, it's taken out of discretionary, and it's just, you know, is it meet the height requirement? Is the setback right? All that kind of stuff.
Right. So someone would be basically arguing that staff didn't make the right finding in terms of making sure that it met all the code standards.
And they would have to appeal based on a specific matter, such as maybe invading privacy. If it were a two-story house, this is not a two-story house, but they would have to focus their appeal to a specific issue.
Okay. But as regards to the, sorry, go ahead.
So privacy is not a health or safety issue, so the neighborhood would not have a standing. The neighbor making the appeal won't have any standing, is my understanding of this situation. So what's the point?
Right. So basically, they'd be arguing if staff got it wrong for whatever reason in their review. That's their only argument. They couldn't make it based on privacy.
Ouch.
Okay. So then no action needs to be taken on this because it's going to be handled ministerially.
That's correct.
Okay. Next up on the agenda is design review permit 20-05.
Excuse me, Chairman Dennison, can I just comment on this a little bit?
Yes.
Just on one point.
Yes.
And that's, I think this is what, and Mr. City Attorney, correct me if I'm wrong, but at our last meeting, my analysis of the City Attorney's letter and discussion regarding design review is that we can't have design review on a multi-story or multi-family dwelling issue like this. But if there were objective design standards, then those standards could apply. And I asked that question at the council meeting when we were talking about objective design review standards. And my question was, from my interpretation, does that mean that these objective design standards really take the place of design review? So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. City Attorney, but you told me yes, that if we were to develop design standards, then those could apply. And so my conclusion after all this, and I didn't say that when we made the motion, I should have, which was to give direction back to the Planning Commission or to staff to work on design standards for multiple family dwelling units going forward in the future. Now, I don't know, no timeline to do that, but this is the problem we have with these two new laws. We have no say over the design at all unless we have objective design standards. So I'll ask the city attorney to elaborate a little bit, but that was my interpretation and why I feel it's necessary in the future to have design standards for projects like this.
So Mayor, that's correct. If we were to, we can adopt objective design standards. If we adopt those objective design standards, they would apply to both projects subject to the Housing Accountability Act. We can also adopt them for ADUs as well. So we can also have objective design standards for ADUs. So both of those would apply.
So I hope that was helpful. Maybe not.
Well, objective design standards are a really tricky business, especially on an issue like privacy, because you have to be really exact, and site conditions are almost infinite, along with, temporary things like landscaping, considerations. So it's close to impossible to do a completely objective design standard. I guess maybe we could aim at something closer, which is probably a good exercise, to do that.
My thinking is that it's better than nothing.
Yes. What they had up in Los Gatos, where I came from, they had a standards and a book that had standards alongside guidelines. The standards were the code, which were as objective as they could be, but then the guidelines showed, in words and pictures, what they were aiming at, which was it was very easy to understand the two together then. Because just a separate cold objective standard doesn't work very well on its own. And so.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right. Next up is design.
Point of order, Chair. I think we need to ask if there's anybody who wants to comment, because it is a public hearing. We opened a public hearing.
Thank you. If there is
Probably there's nobody, but just in case.
At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning this specific item. The Commission welcomes your virtual attendance and participation. When addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 5 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. Copies of the agenda have been available online. State legislation limits the Commission's ability to take action on specific requests. Do we have any callers waiting?
You do not have any callers for comment on this item.
All right. Do we need a motion to close this public hearing? Or can we just close it as this being referred back ministerially?
You can close it.
Okay.
Sure.
So at this time, we will close design review permit 20-04 as a ministerial review instead. Next up, design review permit 20-05 or 127 East Highland Avenue. Does staff have a presentation?
Yes, we have a PowerPoint presentation for the commission this evening, and Joshua Wolf will be giving that presentation.
All right, tonight the commission will also be reviewing design review permit 20-05 for 127 East Highland Avenue. And before I begin, I would like to make a clarification to the public notice that was given. Public notice was for a, let me flip through my notes here. It was for a 5,341 square foot duplex, but the clarification I need to make on that is that that would be the gross floor area resulting from all buildings on the site, and that the clarification also needs to be made that the duplex itself is 3,898 square feet. And tonight,
the attorney, does that run us afoul of the notification process, or are we allowed to make Scrivener's errors such as that? You're on mute, sir.
I missed the error. Can we repeat that one more time?
The error had to do with a Scrivener's error, it sounds like, between the gross floor square footage and the square footage of the duplex. So it was noticed at a higher square footage than was accurate. Does that affect our noticing process at all?
No, I think we can proceed. I don't think that's substantial enough to prejudice a potential complainant.
Great. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. So the design review permit is to allow the project involving construction of 2 additional residential units on a parcel zoned R3 multifamily residential, where there is existing 1 unit. The project will replace an existing 1-car garage with a 231 square foot 1-car garage. This is to be located 2 feet 7 inches from the west property line. This is one of the aspects of which it does not meet development standards. The project will also construct a 3,898 square foot duplex. This is located behind the single family residence. And this will also allow for an aggregate floor area of 5,341 square feet. This also does not meet development standards. The project is also doing its best to preserve the existing 1,212 square foot single family residence. The project is located on the north side of Highland Avenue, east of Baldwin, and near the intersection of Merrill Avenue, closest major street being Mountain Trail Avenue. All properties surrounding are either R3 residential or 2-family residential, noted here by the golden zones. So in summary, the project will be preserving the single-family residence. The existing garage will be demolished and rebuilt at 231 square feet in a different location. This leaves us a total of 1,443 square feet here. The 2-family duplex residential area of 3,063 square feet with garage total area of 835 square feet. For that subtotal area of 3,898 square feet, all in total of 5,341 square feet. At the north end, we have a 2-family residential property. There's substantial vegetation and a high fence to aid in the mitigation on privacy. As in the east, there's cypress trees here to help with impacts on privacy. To this property, there is a single-family residence. On the south end is the remainder of the property. There is an oak tree there. This oak tree is proposed to be removed with the approval by the Public Works Department on a mitigation of a 5-to-1 replacement ratio, with location to be determined by the Public Works Department. And from the west is a multifamily residential property here. As you can see, there is a carport here for these residences, as well as just a general blacktop area. And like our last project, the neighborhood analysis will include a variety of not only single-family but multifamily residences, and some industrial areas here. The problem with the neighborhood analysis is that it includes the square footage for units on multifamily residential areas, and it was very difficult to come to a conclusion on the total square footage per property and comparing that to total square footage on this property, also comparing square footage of each unit to each unit where there's also single family units. So this is largely disregarded as part of fitting into the neighborhood, and we'll look more at the design of the project. So I suppose I should go at this more in depth. So our lot size is not changing. It is a tier 3 lot, 8,500 to 11,000 square feet. Building coverage does allow for 60%. Normally this would allow for 45%, but because they are incorporating permeable pavers, they are allowed an allotment of an extra 15%. So that they can go up to 60%. They are only reaching 57.9%. Building height, they are allowed 30 feet, and they are building to 30 feet. Their floor area ratio, they are allowed 55% or 5,267 square feet. As you can see, it does not meet the code. This is a difference of roughly 75 square feet or 0.7% above what is allowed. As for the setbacks, our front is not changing as part of the effort to preserve the existing single-family residence, where they are otherwise allowed 15 feet at the first floor and 25 feet at the second floor. From the sides, they only need 10% of the lot width, or 5 feet from each side. They are providing, for the duplex itself, they are providing 5 feet and 1 inch from each side. However, for the one-car garage being built for the existing residence as a replacement, it is only located 2 feet 7 inches. This is due to the fact that it would otherwise not work in that location. And for the rear setback, they are required 10 feet. They're providing 10 feet 1 inch, so that does meet code. We also have to look at open space requirements here for multifamily developments. We have a total combination of roughly 2,600 square feet, of which 500 per unit or 1,500 square feet of open space total is required, and this does meet code. For parking, there's an existing 1 space. They are only proposing 5 spaces, and we'll go into that in more depth later, but they are required 6 spaces, so this does not meet code. And then I just outlined it's the same kind of relief of development standards for the preservation of a single-family residence on the site. The Commission can consider some relaxation of setbacks and other zoning requirements for that purpose. On our site plan here, we have indicated here the removal of that oak tree. It is identified in the Arborist Report, Attachment G of the staff report. Again, with that condition of the Public Works Department that a 5-to-1 replacement ratio towards the city's fund for trees be provided. And actually, that 5-to-1 would be for 24-inch box trees. Other site improvements include the whole grading of this rear area here at the north end. And most of what here you see here will be preserved. And beginning here at the north face of the existing single-family residence is where you'll see improvements here on the next slide. So we had our previous location of the garage here at the east end. It is being moved to the west end where it is 2 feet 7 inches. It could not be squeezed furthermore unless we had to, unless it impacted into the residence more, which would reduce its level of preservation. Here moving up north, we have the motor court. This is proposed in the darker gray area as permeable paving. The lighter gray area here is impermeable surface area. And then at the rear, you do have the duplex. And as you can barely see, 5 feet 1 inch from each side and 10 feet 1 inch from the rear. At the rear, we also have the open space location. This is designated as private open space for each unit. And here between the proposed 1-car garage and the unit in this little alcove, we have the private open space for the single-family residence. And then in the front is being the designation for the common open space of 2,000 square feet. So the duplex is a little bit of a complex situation at a split level design. The units are symmetrical in design, so as I describe this, it will be per unit. The garage is at the lowest level here. Each garage provides 2 spaces for cars. And then moving up a half level is at the entrance at the side. In this space is the bedroom, but it's better represented over here. You'll see that this is where the bedroom is, and then there's also access to the stairs for the upper levels. This space here is the same as this space. It's not an underfloor space. It's all pretty much to grade. And then moving up another half level from the bedroom, we have the dining room and kitchen per unit, as well as access into bedroom number 2 with a balcony towards the side and southern edge of the building. And moving up one more half level, we have the living room at the north end of the property with access to a balcony facing north. And one more level up to the last level, we have the master suite with balconies adjoining each other and divided. Each bedroom does come with its own bathroom. And moving up to the last level, we have the roof area where there is going to be a mechanical platform, skylights, and areas for solar photovoltaic systems to be installed at the time it is constructed per building code requirements. For our elevations, we have, starting with the potentially most visible, publicly visible elevation at the south elevation, we can see more of what the architectural design looks like. The choice in colors overall building was selected in an effort to work in harmony with the existing single-family residence while also utilizing earth tone colors. A modern craftsman style was selected so that all buildings on the property would appear to be one cohesive design while still allowing room for differentiation through use of materials. The majority of the building is clad in stucco of a light tan color, and all portions of the roofs, except where the mechanical platform is and solar panels are, will be located, will utilize gray composition shingle. These materials will blend into the surroundings to offer more visual interest towards the different uses of materials. First with the brick veneer at the wrapping the garage here at the lower level. Next with the horizontal siding here as a darker color. And then with the board and batten under the gable ends on the roofs here. And lastly, with the more striking feature here of the red trim fascia board. This provides focus for the center and the top of the structure. At our side elevation, we can see the continuation of the wrapping of that brick veneer, continuation of the wrapping of that horizontal siding for that southern projection, and mostly clad stucco siding for that side. We can also see that the front door is the same consistent color with that trim to provide some extra visual interest here. And on the north elevation, which is probably going to be the least publicly visible, we have continuation and consistency with materials used, board and batten under the gable ends, and stucco on the siding, as well as the red trim fascia board. And then the other side is just a mirror of its other side, and using the same kind of materials, same wrapping, everything. And just to show that this is a continuation of full wrapping of that siding as well. From a section view, we can better demonstrate what each floor looks like. So from that 2-car garage, you may have noticed that there was a little alcove here, alcove space here. This wouldn't be counted as floor area as it is only 3 feet 3 inches from that level to the ceiling. So it is just storage space in there. And then again above, there's nothing below the room. It's just the room being demonstrated on that floor plan. Moving up another half level, we have that kitchen dining area with bedroom. Another half level, the living room, and then the final level, the master suite. And from a cross section here of the transverse section, you can kind of see more of what the stairs configuration looks like. And then just wanted to provide some extra detail for that garage being added to. It is also going to stay consistent in style to its building it's being attached to, and as well as consistency in complementary features with the duplex being added. Just some more detail to each material being used as a composition shingle gray for the roof, a boarded batten siding for the areas under the gable. It's a little bit darker than the lap siding used at the southern projection. Light tan stucco, brick veneer, and then vinyl windows for use throughout all windows, and sliding glass doors. Here we can see kind of a massing study. What was done by the applicant was to insert a 3D model of this within a Google Maps to try to give some context for the surrounding area. Obviously, as we've seen from pictures, that this is a little bit different of a situation where there's a building here. But this kind of remains the same, and you can kind of see it does pretty much fit within at least this context to the west. From a front elevation, this is kind of what you would see as a rendering, but I have another image here ahead where you can see more detail from at least the driveway of what it would look like at street level, and also with a comparison of the existing single-family residence. And just some more 3D renderings to show you what it would look like, and with some more context to its surroundings. So for this application, the following findings need to be made: that the proposed project is consistent with the general plan designation of residential medium-high density, as the project preserves the existing single-family residence. The proposed project is in the rear with little visual impact to the public view and will not unreasonably interfere with the use, possession, and enjoyment of surrounding and adjacent properties. The height, bulk, scale, mass, and siding of the proposed project remains similar to the existing residence from public view and is compatible with existing neighborhood, landforms, and surroundings. The proposed I'm sorry, that should not say single-story project. The proposed project reflects the scale of the neighborhood and does not visually overpower or dominate the neighborhood and is not ill-proportioned. And the proposed project does not unreasonably interfere with the public views or the views and privacy of neighbors, nor does it produce unreasonable noise levels or cause material adverse impacts. The proposed project exhibits a modern craftsman architectural style, is a coherent project-wide design, and is complementary to the existing single-family residence, especially in areas where it is not visible from the public view. And finally, the proposed project is not actually seeking relief from development standards for additional height, although it is seeking development standards for different reasons. Tonight, the Planning Commission can approve the design review permit pursuant to Planning Commission Resolution 20-19. They can approve design review permit with modifications. They can deny the application, identifying the finding that the Planning Commission feels cannot be made on the basis of rejecting those findings. And they could continue the project and provide staff and applicant with direction. Staff recommends approval of design review permit 20-05 pursuant to Planning Commission Resolution 20-19 with attached conditions. Thank you. Does the commission have any questions?
Any questions of staff before we move on?
Yeah, I have one. The space between the unit and the back of the house for those cars that back out, what was the radius on that again?
Let me see if I can pull that up. So this shows 26 feet backup space. I'll try to point that out here. So it's a little bit hard to see, but this does point out 26 feet. And this is on sheet 1.0 of the staff report in attachment D. I'm sorry, not 1.0.
I found it. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff?
I have a question. The parking, they need 6 spaces to be compliant. What options were considered? I'm not sure of the code as far as parking in the front. Could they do that? Because they seem to be set back quite a ways.
So the required front yard setback for R3 properties is 15 feet at a 1-story level. So there could have been consideration for parking in this area. However, the applicant and staff feel that this would be not characteristic of a single-family property, and it would not work towards preservation of this existing unit.
Okay.
So yes, a 2-car garage rather than a 1-car garage could have been built here. That would have satisfied that development standard, both for setback and for parking.
Do they have to be 6 covered spaces or just 6 spaces?
There has to be 6 covered spaces that could either be by a carport or a garage.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? Does the applicant have a presentation they would like to share with us?
Sure. Give me I'll make it quick. Good. Yeah. My name is Jim Moran. I work for Wilkins Family Construction as a project manager. We acquired this property with the intention to using the R3 code that allows some wiggle room to try to make some density happen on a rental property. So this isn't a for sale. It'll be like a triplex for rent. Working with staff, we determined that it would have been difficult. We did explore using the front more. There are 3 oak trees on the front, and so and there would be some grading issues where there's some original cobblestone walls and such. So we kind of came to the conclusion that we would try to see what we can do in the rear. We did ask for the 1 tree to be removed with litigation or mitigation, sorry, and it seems like we worked through that. Working with the lead designer with the architect firm, I think we came up with a really good design, and we did I did send out letters to all the surrounding property owners. Did get the 2 responses. Importantly, the 2 that are the single families, the gentleman and his wife in the rear home have a beautiful craftsman home up on Laurel. They came to the property, and they did give their thumbs up on the project. And then the project to the east owner actually lives out of state, but did send a written letter in just asking that the cypress trees stay. And those are actually on his property, so that wouldn't even be an issue for us. They wouldn't be touched. We feel like with the challenge was that the single family house that we want to save is located in the center of the property. And so we couldn't, without tearing that down, it was really hard to space the property. So that's kind of how we came up with the design and the rear. And we feel like the massing, there's some giant condominiums that come back from Laurel that are going to actually tower over ours. The single family behind us is set way back. Their pool is to the east, and then the house on the east has a large backyard that potentially I could see being developed in the same way someday. And then the property on their side is a parking lot with I'd say a 1960-ish apartment complex. So we feel like we got a really good design. I'd love some input, but we feel like we've made with all the difficulty we had getting this to work. We feel like the 2.5 feet or the 2.7 is something that will still allow the tenant in the front to have a parking space, and we think it should work fine. if you have any questions, we actually have the lead designer, I believe, on the Zoom. We also have the landscape architect. So if you guys have any questions, they'll be ready for they can give you any answers they have to. Thank you.
I have a question on the parking. You're providing one covered space for the existing house, and it currently has one covered space, right?
Correct.
So you're keeping the parking for the house the same, but you're adding 2 covered spaces for the each new unit.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions for the applicant?
I have a question. Why did you go 75 square feet over the limit? It seems like you were so close. I mean, why couldn't you make it work?
Oh, I can answer that. Hi, my name is Victor Lockett. I am in charge of the design. And originally we were much over, and through, I guess, some magic while still trying to meet the program, this is this is as close as I could get, you know. It's, you know, especially in trying to make numbers work, that 0.7% is something that, you know, I don't know. I mean, I tried what I could while still meeting the you know, while still meeting the program, and I don't know how to. It's...
I can, you know, being the person that would pushing the design, you know, in Sierra Madre, we're always pushing for a family. You know, that's who's going to be the tenant, and so the 3-bedroom, we pushed Victor on the 3 bedrooms, and at some point a bedroom can only be so small. So between getting the correct size of the bedroom and still trying to get our 3 bedrooms in there, and Victor did, it made it work, and we're hoping that 75 feet is something that you guys can agree with.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Jim, just real brief, the parking in the front, I see one tree that's up against the wall, and there's kind of another one south of there. Even though you're just trying to put one single car garage for the unit, if you turn it, I don't know if you arrange it differently, isn't there space in the front without having to take out any trees?
Well, the challenge is that I don't know if you went by the site, but it does slope up from Highland, and so the driveway is actually is probably 2-3 feet below grade from the front yard. So the front yard's graded flat, and the driveway's dropped. So you'd have to cut a pretty drastic slope, and I don't even know what the code would allow, but you'd have to come up into that front yard. There's just 2 oak trees that are in front of the house on the on the east side, and there's 1 oak tree on the like a property oak tree. So I'm sure there's always a way, there's always a will. It got complicated, and then we talked about by adding even a carport might take away. I mean, the whole goal was to save it, and we were just worried how we're gonna make it look right.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you. At this time, we will go back to community input. At this time, any persons may address the Planning Commission concerning this specific item. The Commission welcomes your attendance and participation virtually. When addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 5 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. And at this time, we'll give 1 minute to see if there is anybody who wants to participate in public comment.
Commissioner, it does not appear that you have any callers for this item.
All right, if a caller does come through in the next 2 minutes or so, go ahead and please let us know, and we'll revert to comments.
Will do.
Thank you. In the meantime, let's bring it back to the commission for discussion. Who would like to lead off?
Yeah, I could go first. First, I should say I drove by. I should have mentioned that before. I drove by the other house as well. Also, I visited this house when it was for sale a few months ago. So I didn't walk around on site now, but I have been before. And I think actually going to the backyard is really helpful to understand how this property fits into the neighborhood. I appreciate staff's stab at the neighborhood analysis, but I think really we shouldn't spend a lot of time on those in these kind of mixed neighborhoods, because it's hard to compare, you know, a single family house, a giant multifamily, an industrial building. It's all sort of mixed up, and numbers don't really tell you anything. You really just have to sort of go and look. As far as the 3 deviations that were asked for, I like the way in this one the staff put it in laid it out very clearly in the report, and all 3 of these don't give me any heartburn. The parking is keeping the same the parking that they have for the house, and then they're adding code compliant parking for the new units. So I really don't see we have an issue there. With regard to the setback, that's a little close, but the neighbor on that side has a carport that's on the property line and a very big fence. So I really don't see an issue there. The 74 feet is only like 1 or 1.5% above the limit. You know, it would have been better if they got that under, but I think that's, you know, within a reasonable wiggle room. Obviously, the easiest thing to do here would have just been to demolish the existing house. And then they could have put their program in and met all the code compliance, but we want them to save the house. We want less disturbance to the neighborhood. And so I think it's appropriate for us to grant these deviations from standards in order to accomplish that. I'm a little sad to see the oak tree go in the back, but there are a lot of oak trees on this site, and it would be pretty much impossible to develop without taking that one out. And lastly, although not a deal killer, I'm really not a fan of the brick veneer. The way it's broken up by the garage doors, it's obviously not a foundation, and it just looks like a false applique. And I would encourage the applicant to explore alternates to that, because I don't think it's doing them any service. But it's very far in the back, so I could still make the findings if they leave it on.
Thank you, Commissioner. Who would like to go next?
I'll go. The 3 areas that we're looking at, the setback on the 1-car garage is 2.7, but on the other side there's a whole driveway. John is right. The people on that the west side are right up to the wall. It's a cinder block wall. I'm not sure that that's an imposition to the neighbors. The street parking, the parking issue, I think that if the people in the duplex in the back are going to have parking, if the person who is in the front house needs a parking, they can always get a street permit and park at the curb, and that would solve everything, and they would still have. And the city, there are a lot of houses in this town where you don't have a place to put a second car, and so you have to get a street permit. And the floor area ratio is 0.7%. I think that's for what we're getting out of this. I think it's fine. I commend the architect. The visual from the front, the roof pitch and the highlights on those eaves match the look on the front house, so it looks like a uniform design. They've done a clever job of putting in 2 units in a space where I didn't think that was very possible, but they've done a clever way of layering the house, and it's surrounded by multifamily units and other large lots where other residences are not up next to the property line. So I think I can make all these findings.
Thank you, Commissioner Spears. Commissioner Pointer?
I'll go. Yeah, well, I agree. If this wasn't a preservation project, we'd be looking at this a lot differently. So I don't have a problem with it because they adequately preserve the residents and cleverly, put a really good design in the back. If you look at them separately, I think, they both have merits on their own. So you just have to kind of remember they're on the same lot. That's how I look at this. So I can approve it with, without any modification, unless they want to change some facades for John.
Commissioner Dallas?
I concur with the previous commissioners, with one exception. I really like the way the brick echoes the brick that's so prominent in the front. It's it's an aesthetic thing. It's not a deal breaker, but and this extra square footage when they were so close kind of irks me, because designers always design to the limits, and if we let limits go, they just it's like breaking a taboo. But on the other hand, the design sort of carries the day for me. And I did verify that all the rooms were just about as small as they could be and be acceptable. So yeah, I'm okay. I can make the findings on this.
Great. I did go by the site. Well, I didn't go on the site. I did potentially drive up that driveway next to it to see exactly how everything was laid out. Where the encroachment is into the setback is a driveway. Nobody's going to notice that. It's a mixed use, and not a mixed use, but a multi-family lot. It looks par for the course in the neighborhood. I think it's great that they were able to preserve that front house and keep that looking the way that it does up front. And so I have no issues with it as it's designed. So having heard all of the commissioners, I will entertain a motion.
Hold on. I'll move to, first I want to add something though. I went by the site also and met Jim Moran there. And so we walked the site together, so just for the record. I move to approve it as is.
Second.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and just I would like to acknowledge staff, because they were very, very helpful, both Vincent and Joshua.
So, yes.
Great.
Thank you much.
All right, next on the agenda. Option 2 Municipal Code Text Amendment 20-04, amending Chapter 17.68 parking.
I have a brief oral presentation for you this evening to kind of outline the project as proposed, the parking code amendments. So on October 28th, the City Council remanded the parking code back, or update back to the Planning Commission at the request of Commissioner Hutt, to allow staff to present new information that was not previously considered by the Commission, and that being the parking credit program that was proposed by staff. The task at hand this evening is for the Commission to forward a recommendation for consideration at the November 10th City Council meeting, which is next Tuesday evening. And as stated in the October 28th Council letter to the Planning Commission, which is included in your packet, the objective of the parking code update is to relax parking requirements and consider the impact to applicants with regard to time, cost, and bureaucracy. It is the opinion of the City Council that the recommendation forwarded by the Planning Commission is overly complex, creates new and unnecessary hurdles for businesses, and does not meaningfully reduce parking regulations for businesses that wish to locate to Sierra Madre. This directive is not a call to redraft the entirety of the parking code. It is the intent that the majority of the Planning Commission recommendation stay intact. Staff is recommending the following change to the Planning Commission recommendation: to eliminate the in lieu fee program. While this program does relax the parking requirements in the commercial zone for new construction, it also establishes a new fee requiring businesses to obtain a minor conditional use permit.
Can I just, it doesn't require a minor conditional use permit. I just don't understand why staff said that in the staff report to the city council and why it's in the staff report now. The minor conditional use permit is only required if it's more than half of the amount of parking that's required. Up to that, it's of right.
Right, greater than, if the more than 50% of parking would require the minor CUP. So that's one of the proposals, is to eliminate the in lieu parking fee. And one of the reasons for that is that the city already has a parking assessment district coupled with a lighting district, landscape and maintenance district. So the impression is that we are kind of double dipping in terms of establishing a fee, a new fee for new construction projects in the city. So staff is recommending a couple of options, or one option specifically, to impose a parking credit program that takes account to all the parking spaces located within the city public lots. So currently we have 396 or 369 parking spaces in on-street parking spaces, 216 and 369 parking spaces in the city parking lots. And staff did an analysis of all the buildings that have direct street frontage along North Baldwin and South Baldwin and East and West and Sierra Madre Boulevard within the downtown area. And we identified 61 storefronts. And of those storefronts, we did an exercise in determining what types of uses are located in each of these buildings. And if we just counted specialty retail and restaurant uses, there would be about 10 parking spaces available as a credit to each of the storefronts. And if we continued and we started adding in hair salons and nail salons and a few other uses, then we were able to credit approximately just over six parking spaces per storefront. And we felt that would be fairly sufficient to be able to accommodate new uses that come in for a restaurant and specialty shop. What's excluded from that count, because that would drop us down to about 4 parking spaces per storefront, is educational facilities, office uses, entertainment and recreational uses from the overall total. So if you wanted to, we could go through each of the attachments. Attachment 3, which was our parking analysis case study. Attachment 4 is the city parking lots and curbside parking. And attachment 5, the comparative city parking matrix for sample uses. And that's basically looking at what other cities are doing and how they identify parking and how they distribute parking. But at this point, perhaps we should get feedback from the commission and establish a dialogue to see how we want to address this. Also included in the your report is, under Exhibit B, which is the last component of the entire packet, is the staff amendment to section 17.68.020, parking spaces required, and that basically omits the in lieu parking fee language and introduces the 6 parking credits for these storefronts, excluding the office uses, educational uses, recreational and entertainment spaces. So I am willing to take comments and questions at this time.
I have one question. Is it true that there was some confusion with our last report that a number of people in City Hall tried to work out how many parking places are required and kept coming up with different numbers based on confusion in the language?
That's true. There were 3 different parties interpreting the codes proposed by the commission, and we came up with 3 different results.
Would it be helpful for staff and everyone else if in future we attach more examples of how we are thinking and how we came up with the proposal we did? I mean, tonight we had a little confusion on the Montecito property because staff made some assumptions about code that we didn't see. How about more language in our productions where we give examples on how we came up with the language we did and what the logic is?
We can certainly do that as we move forward with this project and others. We're looking at code amendments.
Commissioner Spears, on that point too, as I think through it, one thing we did right in design review is that, if you remember, the commission had proposed something, and then staff went back and tried to run through a couple of examples itself, and then came back with our feedback, and then we had multiple iterations, kind of because as a result of our of trying to apply this in real life scenarios, we found that it doesn't really pan out the way we had anticipated. We did that for design review. Unfortunately, when we got around to doing it for the parking code and the commercial code, the recommendation from Planning Commission had already been submitted. So definitely for code amendments like that in the future, before the Planning Commission submits their recommendation, we should definitely play out a couple of hypos to see how this would work in real life.
Yeah, I think I think it would save a lot of people a lot of heartache and some bad feelings, because there was significant effort put in to try to come up with to craft the best possible result. And it was, I think it missed everybody's radar. I think there was some, I'm still confused about what the impact of the timing and, how things ended up the way they are. But I think that there needs to be some more effort put into exactly what the impact is on some of these issues.
And if I could address Commissioner Pevsner's earlier question, he had asked a question during the, what was it during?
Yeah, at the beginning, it was really the mayor's question, because it was about process. So you're trying to, what you're explaining is changing the process, because even though when I got a letter from the city manager on it, I asked him the question. I said, he probably answered it in the sense that, staff does this all the time. And I said, well, listen, I've been around long enough to know this is a pretty one-off occurrence where staff reviews something where we get to look at it again, and we're kind of expecting it. This was out. If I hadn't received John's letter, I wouldn't have known what was going on with the process until after City Council had made the decision. I tried, was going to try to come to the meeting, but it was, a work late kind of a thing, and I couldn't make it. So, I was interested in listening because we'd spent so much work on everything else. But the answer I got back was more about process. I mean, that was what the gist of what I got out from the city manager, and I agree. So if that's what we're addressing, I think that just needs to be corrected. And maybe the circumstances couldn't have been helped because of the way it went down, because they wanted to look at this on November 3rd. November 3rd. And so we kind of had everything together. We couldn't separate it out. Does that sound logical, like what was going on?
Yeah, and let me talk a little about the process here and why this was unique. This was unique because the city council had something in mind. Usually I think the city council provides the planning commission direction, and the planning commission provides a recommendation, and they adopt that recommendation. Here it was a little different because the city council had something in mind. And the only city staff you have at these meetings is myself and Vincent. So when a recommendation is made, generally before it goes before the city council, you have other people on staff that weigh in. It's like, for example, for the in-lieu fee, for example, I know we got feedback from finance staff that said the in-lieu fee that we've had in the past didn't generate a lot of money because we weren't getting enough projects that would generate an in-lieu fee. And so, for example, so we had this tiny pot of money that's been sitting for like, I don't know, 7-8 years that we haven't used because we can't use it for any project in the city. It's like that's something that informed that in-lieu fee decision. Also, there were conversations happening between city staff and individual council members, and they got feedback from individual council members. And so as you can see, like in, I know in Commissioner Hutt's letter, he had emphasized how the amendments by staff didn't reflect the city council's recommendation, because the city council said, don't discriminate based on uses, right? But then you see the city council's letter that came down specifically said, yeah, you can discriminate based on uses for purposes of the 6 parking space allowance, right? And so that disconnect happened because I suspect it's because there was communications between city staff and the city council after the recommendation was made. And so they got more feedback and tried to adjust it according to what city council was looking for. So yeah, I think there are definitely communication gaps there. And in thinking through it, we should be creative about ways to solve it. I mean, one such way is, I guess one such way is probably having a more active, well, I won't opine on that, but we got to figure out ways.
Yeah, we really need to.
I concur.
Certainly, when directions change after our recommendations have been made, our recommendations are always going to be wrong. Right, so that's going to be a challenge that should be remediated. I certainly agree with that. I guess we're probably not going to solve the process question tonight. So I think that focusing on the path forward is probably the way to go here. So who on the commission has recommendations on how they'd like to proceed?
I actually have one that was proposed by one of the callers that, I mean, John mentioned in his letter, and I kind of agree. I said, one of the biggest issues was they want us, I mean, the overriding issue for the city council, they want us to simplify this. And the fact of the matter is, as the city attorney alluded to, we've had these funds of, collecting money for additional parking spaces and things. And we've even given people credits in the past. And then if they pay the money, that at some point, if nothing's developed in the town, they get the money back. I think the project across the street at the doctor's office was one. But the overarching issue is we're going to simplify this matter. Maybe we should just not do anything at all, not make any requirements at all. The fact of the matter is there's adequate parking when we need it. It's just a matter of who wants to park where to get to the storefronts and things like that. And I think
We lost you. We can't hear you anymore.
making no requirements, that would be the most economical and for any applicant, and probably the simplest solution. So nobody has to think about change of use and how many parking places they get and credits and things like that. I mean, I'll use that as a starting point. No?
So I was actually had come to the same conclusion myself, separate from the caller, and was trying as best I could to piece together what it was that the council was after. And it seems like with the incredible number of spaces that we have between Auburn and Baldwin, that there is adequate parking for anybody in this town to use the entire downtown corridor, right? People in Pasadena and Arcadia are walking significantly farther than that and paying for those spots. So nobody has really held up their hand and said, for the vast majority of people, I think that we need to, establish more parking. Now, the flip side of that coin is that the council was pretty clear that there's, 3 areas that they don't want to have that parking counted towards by right. And so my thought was, if we could exempt the parking for existing locations, so long as they stay outside of those 3 uses, then can we only require parking to be reviewed if it's new construction?
Well,
That was kind of
we already do that. I mean, the code that we proposed already eliminates all parking requirements for existing buildings. So, and that's one of the reasons why I still don't understand what the point of the credit that staff is suggesting. Because, if you have an existing building and you switch a use from shop to retail to office to any other use, level the playing field was the direction we were given. We set all the parking requirements the same. So existing buildings have no new parking requirement at all. And new buildings have a set that's not based on use. So I guess to me, the question is, the council came back to us and said, this doesn't reduce parking burdens enough. And I don't understand how that computes, because we have no parking requirements on existing buildings, and the parking that requirements for new is drastically lower, and in many cases more than half what it used to be or what other cities are. So what more do they want? And I guess I still don't understand that.
So if that's the case, then maybe staff can tell us how it is that they read what we wrote so differently than what we think what we wrote means.
I would like to hear that too.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at attachment 3 to the staff report, it analyzes how many parking spaces would be required under our proposed code. And they have, for one, it says 6, for one, it says 5, and one, it says 3, but the requirement would be 0 under all of those. So I'm just bewildered. I guess that's the place that I'm at.
So as I mentioned before, we were going through the code, 3 different staff persons, and we came up with 3 different solutions or 3 different results. So it is a little bit more complex. We do understand that for new construction, the in lieu fee would only be applicable to that, and only if they are requiring the new construction is in need of additional spaces beyond the 50% requirement. In terms of the existing buildings, existing uses, we understand the parking requirement has been almost omitted in that instance. I think the issue came up with the in lieu parking fee, and that was flagged by City Council.
So maybe we should take these, kind of break them down one at a time. So as far as any existing parking goes, both what the commission put forth and staff's opinion is that there are no parking requirements.
If we worked out both the planning commission and staff assumptions in exercises, and the city attorney and I did that earlier this evening as well, we were coming out with very similar results in terms of both the staff and in comparison to both.
So do we have the calculations for the parking analysis case studies for the planning commission recommendation on attachment 3?
We do not.
We don't, okay.
I think that would be helpful because, I mean, we see what you've come up with, but we don't know how you got there.
That was the planning commission, or the planning commission recommendation, not the staff.
Okay.
Well, what do you mean that's the planning commission recommendation?
The analysis. Commissioner Spears asked if we had the planning commission case study calculations as case studies in attachment 3. And these are planning commission recommendation. Yes, we do have the current parking proposed for an example project. So if we wanted to look at attachment 3, we used a project that was 94 North Baldwin Avenue. And we were looking at the current parking code in this case. It would require 7 parking spaces and 1 van, an ADA parking stall, so for a total of 8. And under the proposed code,
I'm sorry, Vincent, what page is that on in the packet?
It's probably going to be towards the very end. I'm not looking at the municipal code, Muni code.
I found it. It's page 232 for those following along.
Okay. So again, attachment 3 breaks it down from current parking code, proposed parking code, and what that cost would be. It would be a CUP and a design review fee for this particular project that the commission looked at before. What this doesn't do is show what the proposed staff proposed concept would be. In this case, it would just be 6 parking space credit, and then they would still have to provide 1 additional ADA parking space. So all they would have to do is provide the ADA space.
But how does staff calculate that under the planning commission proposal there would be 6 required parking spaces? Because when I calculate it, it's 0, and so I don't understand how staff is saying there's 6 parking spaces needed. Because we have a requirement that says there's a certain number of spaces, and in an existing building, you get a credit for the requirement for the prior use. And because all the uses have the same parking requirement, you you subtract one number from the other that's exactly the same, and you come to 0. And so the required parking spaces on all 3 of these examples is 0. And so that's the disconnect. And I guess maybe we didn't do a good enough job of explaining that. But I thought that was crystal clear. And again, maybe I didn't explain well enough.
I was on the subcommittee, and that's what my memory was as well. And somewhere there's a feedback loop.
Commissioner Pevsner, I think you have to mute one of your.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What's that? All right.
Okay.
So, I mean, I was gonna say maybe it would be useful to, because I haven't reviewed the calculus for the parking analysis case studies, but Vincent and I did review the hypo provided by Commissioner Hutt in his letter. So maybe it'd be useful to review this hypo and see if we get different results, because if I remember correctly, we got different results. Are we okay with that? Do we want to do that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes is the answer. I think that we need to strategically solve for 2 things, right? Because it sounds like there's a disconnect based on what it's supposed to be for the existing case. And then there's the disconnect on what it is supposed to be for new construction, right? So I believe in his model, if it's not a 0 number, then it's a change of use or a new construction. So do we want to solve one first or the other first?
I just want to make a comment. I'm not as deep into this as all of you because I think this was happening before I joined. But if staff and planning commission and council can't understand the code, there's something intrinsically wrong with it. It's got to be simpler somehow. I'm kind of agree with that idea that it has to be simpler, but if the professionals involved here can't even figure it out and are arguing about it. And so I don't know, that's just my 2 cents looking in at this point.
I agree with you.
And probably why I had, even though the code said, you take this number minus this number, it's 0. I was kind of going the simpler route of just saying, let's just specifically say they're exempt.
Well, I think the question there though is whether you want to say that for new construction as well as existing, right? But maybe we could run. Do we want to run through the numbers and talk about it first, or do we want to just stick on policy level first?
It all has to get tackled, I guess. So somebody decide which way they want to go. I mean, do you think that we're going to come up with a policy decision that would obviate the conversation about the examples?
I mean, I'm only suggesting that we review Commissioner Hutt's hypo just so we can all be at least on the same page about what the math is. And I was going to propose that we start with page 2, second paragraph starts with unfortunately, because in that paragraph, he lays out what the parking requirement would be under existing code. And then he states what it would be under the Planning Commission's proposal. And then we can also talk about what it would be under staff's and see if there's a difference there. That was what I was going to suggest. But now I'm already exceeding my bounds because now I'm doing non-legal stuff.
We'll take all the help we can get.
I'm fine with that if we want to do that.
Great. Let's start there and see if we can come to agreement on what the codes proposed by the various parties say.
Okay. So it actually begins as the hypothetical in the first paragraph on page 228
for those that are looking in their agenda packet, 228.
It's giving a hypothetical of a building with 25 feet of street frontage and 100 feet in depth. And it is talking about a credit for a number of parking spaces required from the prior use. So if it were in this instance, a retail going to restaurant, it is explaining that there would be a credit for the existing number of spaces that were there from the prior use.
Well, just to clarify, when somebody occupies a new space and there's a parking requirement, you look at how many physical spaces are actually there, right? And you credit those. So if the parking requirement is equal to or less than the existing spaces, the required number of new spaces is 0, right? And the issue is that under current code, a shop there would require 8, and there's less than that. And that's true in most of the shops in town. But under our current code, you get to credit not just the existing physical spaces, but you get to credit the required spaces for the use that was there. So if you have a use that requires 8 spaces, and then another use that requires 8 spaces comes in, even though there's only 3 parking spaces physically there, you're credited with the full 8, and the required number of new spaces is 0. That's our existing code. That's not anything we're proposing, right? So are we all on board with that?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Good.
So the next example is if you move from a retail store to a restaurant, under current code, a restaurant requires a whole bunch more parking spaces, right? And the way we do it is based on chairs, which is sort of crazy, but it works out to be about 10 per 1,000. So that would be, in this case, it would require 25 parking spaces. And if you have a credit of 8, then you would need to provide 17 new spaces. And, that just isn't feasible, right? There's no place in town that you could do that. And so the issue is that we changed the parking requirements so that they're the same on each space and they don't differ by use. So under our proposed parking, you would have the requirement for if you were going to build the same building new would be 6 parking spaces. But you'd get a credit for that exact same 6 spaces, and it wouldn't matter if you switched from office to retail to restaurant to library to whatever, any non-commercial space that's allowed in the C code that goes in there. And so you would have a requirement of 6, a credit of 6, and the net new would be 0.
Right. Okay, so if you get the 6 parking spaces, you credit the 6 because you have a total credit of 8, right? So you'd credit 6 out of the 8 and you get 0.
No, under our code, the new requirement would be 6 because we lowered we lowered parking requirements. So instead of requiring 25 for a restaurant or 8 for a store, under our proposed code, it would require 6 for either use if it were new.
So I can understand, the 6 is calculated like this, right? You have 3 for the first 1,000, right? And then you have 1.5 for the next 1,000. And because there's 500 left over, you add another 1.5, and so you get 6 total. Is that how you're getting the 6?
No, now I've got to do math. Sorry. This 25 foot of frontage, right? And you go 50 foot deep for the storefront. So that is based on the 3 per 1,000. And then the part that's behind that is at the 1.5 rate. And so then you just add those together and it comes out to 6.
So for the first 50 feet, you're getting 3. And then for everything beyond that, you're getting 1.5, 1.5 gets you to 3 again. So you have 6 total. See, like we were struggling with the math. This is what I'm saying. Like we weren't sure exactly how you had calculated this, and your calculation wasn't reflected in the paragraph.
Yeah, I didn't put the math in, but the beyond going into the nitty gritty of the calculations is the fundamental issue that you get to credit the required number from the existing use, and because all uses have the same rate, there's zero new, no matter what use you change it from. You change from restaurant to nail salon, you change from office to restaurant. It doesn't matter how you change the use, the number of new spaces is zero.
So in B on page 251 is what I'm looking at. You're calculating the number of off-street parking spaces required for non-residential uses shall be as follows. And so we're talking about only new uses there, correct? Not existing.
I'm sorry, I'm not following where you're at.
Oh, so I'm looking at the staff's package.
251, you said?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And so it says number of off-street parking spaces required for non-residential uses shall be as follows. This is paragraph B. And so now are we talking about new uses then? Or are we talking about existing uses?
We're talking about both.
Both, right.
Yeah.
So the way you would calculate your 6 would be based on this calculation, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So I understood the principle you articulated earlier,
right?
About however many existing parking spaces there are, you would apply that for the change in use. I get that. But you would still have to calculate this calculation, right? We still have to figure out the numbers.
Yeah.
Okay.
But whatever the calculation is, it would be exactly the same calculation for the credit, right?
Right, because it's not based on use.
Because it's not based on use.
The previous number, it's actually based on square footage of the building. So while there is a number calculated, it's completely irrelevant because you're starting with the same number that you're
If you calculate it to 6, if you calculate it to 8, if you calculate it to 17, and then you subtract the exact same number, you get 0. So that's the fundamental point, that the number of required uses for an existing building is 0 when the uses change. Now, if you add square footage, well, then you have to park that. That's a different thing. But for the re-tenanting of existing spaces, there's no additional parking required.
So I have a question. We have a pretty fixed downtown. The buildings are all built. The square footage is all the same. The parking's already there. We can't really add parking anywhere. Why are we even bothering with this short of anything that's new construction?
Well, that's exactly the point. That's exactly the point. Our proposal is zeroes out all existing. And so it's all new construction.
I think I understand what you're saying, Commissioner Dowse. What you're saying is, why don't we just say there's no parking requirements for existing uses rather than doing the calculation?
That's right.
We don't have to worry about that. And then only apply the calculation to new construction or additions.
That's easy.
I think the reason why that was done is because the credit mechanism is in existing code. And so when we layered this on, that followed automatically, right? And so if we were doing this from a fresh slate, we would have done that. And so maybe it would be helpful to add in here what that means. But that, I think, is why it evolved that way. Because if you remember in 2018, when we adopted the revised non-conforming ordinance, we put this stuff in about parking, that you get the credit for the past use. And then we also put in a thing that said, and if it's 2,500 square feet or less, then you get a credit for whatever. And so we tried out the concept of not requiring parking on existing spaces, but only up to 2,500 square feet. And so this was just a further extension of that same concept, we're saying, hey, it worked fine. It didn't cause us any grief. Let's just forget it for all existing uses. So that's how it evolved. Granted, that's probably not the most straightforward way to have the code, and we could change that. And we could either change it by saying it straight out or just writing an example that says, you know, this is what it means, but that's what it does mean.
Can we recommend just deleting the code that's the problem?
Well, I think that, so let's walk through a couple of different iterations. I love that idea. I think it's great. I think that it only applies to certain situations. So there's four situations where parking might be considered. One is a change of use where there's no parking real needs that change, right? One is a change of use where there might be a parking concern, such as a storefront that suddenly goes to office. Office people park in those spots all day long. That might be something that we want to consider separate, right? Another one would be if there's an addition to the building, and another would be new construction. So those are kind of the four different permutations of that. It sounds like we're all fairly in agreement that removing parking restrictions for some uses that switch or stay the same are what we're all after. It sounds like it's what we want. It sounds like that's what staff wants. It sounds like that's what city council wants. So, I mean, I think we have that one. The next level is if something changes from a particular use to a different use, are there any types of uses that we would want to put new restrictions on? I thought that I had heard from somewhere along the way that there were 3 different ones that might need to be considered.
Educational, institutional, and something else, yeah.
Educational, entertainment and recreation, and office use, right?
Yeah. Right.
And so maybe that's one where we use the calculation that Commissioner Hutt, well, I guess it would have to be compared against the old use. So that's an even more nuanced thing to consider. And then additions and
new construction.
New construction. And I think on both additions and new construction that some of the formulae that we've talked about could apply just fine, right? Does that sound right? Are those kind of the 4 categories that we think we need to solve for?
Yes.
Yes, seems reasonable.
Okay. So then I think the removing any of the uses that are not residential or a change of use other than those certain categories, that's probably easy code to put in there, right? So then
well, it's already in. I mean, do we want to? I guess we can emphasize it, but it is already there for new use. I mean, for existing use.
Okay. So then what examples would need to be in there so that it's clear to everybody that that's what it means?
Well, if you look on page, we were on 251. If you go down to page 252 and you look at paragraph D, paragraph D is the cross-reference to the current code that provides that relief. So we could put an example there that makes it very clear that changes of uses for existing structures don't require new parking.
Okay. Does staff think that that is sufficient so that we can calculate those numbers the same way?
So what section are you, because I'm looking at the physical packet, not the Municode packet.
It's attachment.
It's the red line of the code.
Exhibit A.
Section.
It's Exhibit A, Vince.
Right. Section 17.68 point.
It's the one with the big table, that all the code that comes after the big table that's crossed out.
17.68.020 then.
Yep.
B. So yes, I remember we looked at this earlier, 17.56.090B. And then we looked that up. I have it here. It's the exemption and exceptions under the non-conforming uses ordinance. So what would you want to change under the parking code in this, under D?
Well, I was suggesting that we already referenced that section and we could put an example in that makes it clear that existing uses, the combination of this and above mean that changing of uses in existing structures will not require any additional parking.
I think that would clarify it.
Okay, so with the additional guidance that we need to re-examine parking for educational, entertainment, recreation, and office use, how do we incorporate that into the code? Do we add except for these three uses and then the code as written?
I don't understand why we're trying to exempt those out when our prior direction was to level the playing field, and the general plan specifically calls for incenting office uses. It seems odd to me that we're punishing those uses by having higher parking standards that sort of runs counter to the main thrust of all our direction. With regard to institutional uses, those aren't going to be in the C code. That's a separate thing. And if you look at the staff report page, where is it? Page 251 B3, has a separate item. So that's already dealt with there.
So I mean,
So institution is set aside and the other ones fall into the previous reference.
yeah, I get that. I guess I'm confused as to where we got the guidance that educational, entertainment, and rec and office use should be considered differently.
That was the staff proposal if we were just crediting the number of spaces in the downtown with direct street frontage and trying to still apply a reasonable number of spaces. If we add educational uses, office uses, we'll probably drop down for number of available spaces per storefront down to 4.
But do we need that credit if we don't have a requirement for for additional spaces for existing buildings?
Then we would not, no.
Do we want it? Was it the intention to apply that credit to new development as well?
No, new development would have to provide the required parking.
Okay, because it seems to me that the credit concept we don't need, because we've already solved to that, and we can put an example in that makes that very clear. The issue of the credit for existing spaces we don't need. If it's really council's desire to do that for new, then I agree with David, who called in, and some of the other people who said at that point, if we're going to do that, we should just get rid of all requirements for commercial parking, because at that point it's sort of really unnecessary.
So staff is the guidance that we should be applying or removing from new or additional construction the parking requirements?
No, I still think we would still utilize parking requirements for new construction. It could be reduced to something that the commission can agree on.
If the new construction was the same size as the previous, because on Sierra Madre Boulevard, we had a fire in the 90s and it took out 3 buildings and they were rebuilt, but they were rebuilt on the same footprint as the old one. So the size of what was going on didn't change much. There's the new optometrist in town is in one of those buildings. So, you know, initially our logic was driven on, okay, how big is this? And, you know, that's how we came up with numbers. But
Yeah.
if we get something that wants I mean, if Roberts goes away or our Taylor's goes away and we get something else in there, then we may need to sit down and think about how much parking this new development will have. And so that's, I think, why I remember having some of that discussion. And I think that's why some of the issue of new construction is in there.
Yeah, that's exactly the discussion we had, is that if there's a big development that takes over where Howie's used to be, or where the post office is, or something like that, that we don't feel comfortable that just going without any parking there. But again, I think it's worth recommending to council that if they really feel like we haven't reduced parking requirements enough on new construction, that the next step is just to eliminate them altogether. Because if you compare what we're proposing to what we used to have and to what other cities have, we're significantly lower, and in many cases less than half. So at some point, it's stupid to have a number that's going to be always lower than what the market is going to put in anyhow. And instead of going through all the administrative hassle of figuring out that number and whatnot, we should just eliminate. I sort of feel like we're getting close there already, but that's that. And well, I'll leave that.
Well, so then maybe the way to get where we need to be is, it sounds like we now, and staff, please, this is the communication we need from you two. Do you agree with the conversations we've had, and you can pass along to the council that for existing uses, as we had initially proposed it, that there's a 0 net change in parking, which basically equates to no parking requirements for existing buildings?
Yes, we can communicate that.
Okay. So then, to your point, John, rather than send up the idea that we should eliminate parking altogether, because I don't think that we've heard that. I think that it goes in the letter from City Council, it says relax parking regulations. It doesn't say remove them. So I think that we should take that to mean that we should leave in the parking as it is for additions and new construction with the request, and staff should request guidance as to what changes, if any, that they want to those before we go down a rat hole of trying to change those. Is that fair? Does that
Yes.
achieve everything that everybody wants?
I think that makes sense. I think that, yeah, okay. If we're good with that, then the next issue is the in lieu fee. I'm a big proponent of the in lieu fee, but it looks like that people don't want to deal with that right now. So we can just cut it out. And maybe somewhere down the line, if people change their mind, we can put it back in. But just so everybody knows, I was on the commission when we cut that out. The reason we cut it out is because the fee was $1,000 a space. And
Refundable.
And what?
It was refundable. They got it back after a while.
So the issue was we didn't want to go through the hassle of figuring out a higher, more appropriate fee. So we just deleted the fee altogether. That's why we cut it out. And it was what we should have done is just figured out what the appropriate new fee would be, which should be somewhere between $10,000 and $25,000. But and having that in lieu fee of right, I think is really important, because when you're developing a property and you have to put in 8 spaces, the way that those arrangements fit in, sometimes that last parking space is just really killer. It's just like the last project we saw that needed 6, but it only provided 5. They just couldn't fit that last one in. And so if you as a property owner have an ability to just buy that one off and know that you don't have to hassle with it, I think that's a great addition. But I can tell I'm going up against a brick wall. So I suggest we just delete the in lieu fee. That's paragraph E in that same section. And we add an explanation in D, and we call it a day. And then we also recommend that if they want more reduction, the right thing to do is just eliminate commercial parking requirements altogether.
Or give guidance on where they want us to trim it. Maybe they're okay with additions, but they want it for new. But I think what I'm hearing is that we don't have enough information or guidance from them on what to do next on parking. Is that fair?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
And I think the other thing is, you know, instead of waiting until everything's perfect, if we sent this up and they wanted to do more about new construction, they could adopt this, right? And then we could revisit the new construction later, and we'd have a tremendous improvement in our current code.
I hope they will. My sense is that the well has already been poisoned, and they want, you know, our credibility with them is nothing, and it bothers me. Well,
I guess the one concern I have with the staff's credit proposal is that layers onto ours. And so what you'd have is a situation where somebody has a change of use, they're required no new parking spaces, and then they get a credit of 6. So what does that mean? Can they sell those to somebody else who needs parking? Does that mean they can convert existing parking to something else? You know, it's just that opens up a can of worms that I don't think we want to explore.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. I thought, and I would love clarification from this, but I thought that because of the understanding of the way that we have the code and what was intended by it and our discussions, that now a lot of that add-on code wasn't going to be needed, that instead of that, we were adding the descriptors so that we wouldn't need that additional staff code. And let me ask, what was your thoughts on that, staff?
No, that would be correct. That would be my assumption, is that if we are modifying the current code as proposed by and clarifying the code as proposed by the commission, then your recommendation to the city council would not to be to incorporate the staff proposal.
Do you have enough information to give the examples that will clarify this?
I believe so. I'm going to have to spend some time on this tomorrow. I'm limited on time because the report's due tomorrow.
Okay, Vincent, if it would be helpful, I think the subcommittee could come up with language. I mean, it's really not hard to just delete E, right? That's
right. I have
just
that,
crossing out.
We have new language for D.
And then the subcommittee could come up with language for you to insert into D. And then the direction with regard to further reductions and potentially eliminating all requirements it wouldn't go in the code itself. It would just be part of the recommendation.
Right.
Right, but I think what I'm hearing from staff is that they need to turn in this report tomorrow so that it can get in the agenda packet 72 hours in advance of the meeting. So I think staff, we're gonna have to trust that staff is going to,
What time do you need it by, Vincent?
Probably about 1 o'clock.
Oh yeah, we can do that. Bob and I can we'll just email a couple things back and forth and then send it to you.
Got it.
We certainly can get it to you by noon.
Yeah, I'll be ready for it.
Is that acceptable to staff?
I just want to be clear because I don't want to get involved in the numbers because that's not my job. I only want to comment on what is and is not legal. I just want to confirm that under as it's written, Director Gonzalez, you have clear direction on how to apply B in a way that Commissioner Hutt is proposing, because if we're still not clear, then we have to amend it so that it is clear. So we're getting the right results here.
Yeah, that's why the subcommittee was going to suggest language.
But they're suggesting language to D, right? And I want to make sure that we know how to apply B, because I don't know how to apply B.
Well, it goes back to the non-conforming uses ordinance.
All I'm saying is, so long as the people on this call beside me know, that's fine, because I'm not going to do the math. So I just want to make sure everyone is on the same page about how that works, because if we're not, and we come to different conclusions again, this is going to be an issue, worse than it was before.
Understood. We're not going to put any math in. It's just going to be clarifying that the combination of these two means that there's no new parking required for reuse of existing spaces, and the numbers set forth in B are going to apply, functionally are going to apply only to new construction, additions and new construction.
But that would require the director to be able to calculate the number in B, correct? So my question is, the director, does he know how to calculate the number in B according to how you're calculating, Commissioner Hutt? That's my question. I want to confirm.
Okay. Okay. Well, I mean, I did the math on the other one while we were talking, and it came out to be 5.7, which was rounded to 6. So if you have for instance, if you have, just to do the math really simply, if you have a building that has 1,000 square feet of prime storefront, right? And then 2,000 square feet of non-prime square front, then it would be 3 for the first 1,000. And then that other would be at 1.5, which 1.5 times 2 is 3. And then you'd get 6 spaces. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
There's been but I want to make a clarification here, because in it says in B2, floor area outside the prime storefront area and actively used outdoor areas such as sales and seating. Under COVID, the city has expanded outdoor areas.
Yeah, I actually recommend striking everything. I recommend striking 2. So
let's do that.
Spaces per 1,000 square feet of the sum of the floor area.
You don't have to, you just, yeah. Okay, we'll do that. if that's simpler, we'll do that.
Because and thank you for bringing that up. I had it in my notes and I forgot that because I couldn't, it just started getting too hard and wonky to calculate that. So just two calculations. You're either in the storefront, you're outside the storefront.
Or you're out. Yep. Boom.
So I have just an interesting question. How many parking places have we lost with all these bump outs?
Not enough to make a difference to this committee.
Okay, then.
But I think informatively we've gained a big asset to the community because I think that outdoor seating is really nice. And actually, when I went out today to drive and look at the different houses, then I drove through downtown, and I think it makes a measurable improvement in town. And so I think reducing our parking is a good thing.
I think we've stumbled on something that makes the town a little nicer. So I agree.
Thank you for bringing up
Just
that.
for clarification, you struck out, you said number 2?
Yes, so it should read 1.5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of the sum of floor area outside the prime storefront area.
Yeah, you don't need the sum because that's when there's 2.
Yeah.
You can just say, but I'll send you that, Vincent.
Okay.
But yeah, so basically there should be 2. You're either in the prime storefront or out of it. There's one calculation for each.
Yep.
I had forgotten that. Thank you, Commissioner Spears. Okay, you're going to get a last chance here, Director Gonzalez. Do you feel like you have the guidance and understand what we're trying to recommend here so that you can cogently put it together?
Yes, I will. While you're preparing a couple of small inserts and getting rid of E, I will amend the resolutions tomorrow and send that over for signature.
Chair Dennison, for my benefit, can we go over all of the edits that we're making just in their totality, just so we know, just so I know what we're doing?
Absolutely. So,
Casey's called into the city manager's office to do the calcs.
So the changes are
17.68.020.
17.
So it's right after the tables is what
Yep.
we're looking at.
So as written, those will be left in there, except for under B, we are changing number 2, B2, to read 1.5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of the floor area outside the prime storefront area.
Period.
Yep.
The next change is to section D, same code section, section D, where we would insert an example or language to clarify that no change of use will result in any requirements for change of parking. And I mean, I think those are the 2. Oh, and sorry.
And E goes.
E goes away. And any of the changes that were recommended by staff previously as the amendment on top of it to try to clarify everything, all of those are removed as well.
Right.
And does that include staff's edit to C where they strike 4 and 5?
I wouldn't recommend doing that. I don't see why we want to strike those.
We just said that the sidewalk and dining area is an improvement.
Well, but
Yeah.
so it's a good question. And I think that our hope is that the more reasons we have to obviate the need for parking, the better. Right? So each one of these is a reason that we can say, you don't need that parking that would have been required otherwise, right? Isn't that what section C is?
Yes.
And also just to point out, for outdoor dining, we don't require additional parking spaces.
Well, we don't when it's in the sidewalk,
Right.
but on private, because we had that conversation on the tea house. We were potentially going to require them to have parking if they had outdoor dining on private.
Right.
So this would give them the opportunity to have relief from that.
Say hypothetically, if you were a restaurant near Lima that was now putting a bunch of tables in your parking lot, hypothetically.
As it reads sidewalk or outdoor dining. So do you strike sidewalk then?
I think that's.
Well, I think it codifies existing practice. So if you think it's better to take it out, we could, but.
Can I point out that right now, the need for parking with the sidewalk dining is about the same as the indoor restaurant because they're not serving indoors right now. But if you have a restaurant serving indoors and outdoors in patios created in parking spaces, that's a much bigger parking load. So.
That's a fair point, and that will be interesting. You bring up an interesting point that what happens to the parking demand when restaurants can eventually
Do both.
Use both.
Yeah.
Something this is a great start, and we are always able to come back and make it stricter if that becomes a problem at the direction of the council.
Yeah.
So I believe that those are the totality of the changes. Did I miss any of the changes?
No, but I did want to address one other question that popped up at some point along was the issue of whether we round up or down. And I think that we haven't addressed that. And in the absence of any specific direction on that, we would just use normal math, and 1.5 would round up to 2. So if you're required to have 1.5 spaces, you need to provide 2, and if it's 1.4, you provide 1. That's different than affordable housing, where you round those kind of things specifically up or down depending on if they're affordable units. But I don't think we need to do anything special here with that in that regard.
Okay. Is there anything else? I guess we should take public comment, huh? Public comment. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning this specific agendized item. The Commission welcomes your virtual attendance and participation. When addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 5 minutes to assure an orderly meeting. Do we have anybody wanting to comment?
We do not have any callers for public comment.
All right, if somebody does join, please patch them through. Because do we need a motion on this? Yes, so we need a motion to put forth the recommendation with the proposed edits to council.
Also move.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 No opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody, for that. Next up, Planning Commission reports. Great. After that, Planning and Community Preservation staff reports.
So the next meeting of the Planning Commission is on November 19th, and currently we have two projects. One is a certificate of appropriateness, and another one is a design review permit, which includes a second story. And also, just to let you know, the City Council at their November 10th meeting will have two items on the agenda besides the parking requirements. Both of them are Mills Act contracts, 331 East Allegria and 397 West Montecito. So both of those have applied for a Mills Act contract. And also on December 1st, staff will be hosting a Priority Sites Housing Element Zoom workshop, and that'll be held at 6 p.m. And actually that's, I have here on January 7th, not 1st, January 7th. So we've sent out notices to the property owners that would be impacted by the priority sites that had been reviewed by City Council. They gave staff direction to proceed with community outreach to the property owners. And also we will invite anyone who else wants to participate in that Zoom meeting. We do have information posted on our webpage where you would be able to sign up for the Zoom workshop. So if you can visit the planning webpage under Housing Element Update, you'll see information there.
What time did you say that meeting is?
6 p.m.
Okay. Is that expected to run into the Planning Commission meeting that night?
No, this is a, let me check something.
Chair Dennison, it's on a Tuesday.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I heard January 7th. My mistake.
January 7th, we will bring it, the results and feedbacks from the community workshop and bring it to the Planning Commission.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. So January 1st workshop, January 7th, the update and for feedback to the from the Planning Commission.
January 1st, New Year's Day.
New Year's Day, you're doing a workshop?
What was that?
January 1st is New Year's Day. We were asking if we expected a lot of turnout on that day.
Well, with COVID, you're not going anywhere.
December 1st.
December 1st.
Oh, okay.
That makes all the difference.
Question on that, Vincent. Did the council decide to find priority sites only outside Measure V or within and without, or did they say that they wanted to do community outreach first?
They're doing both within and without. They've identified the post office site is included in one of those priority sites, as well as the lots in the Mariposa parking lots.
And so if we went ahead with this priority sites in Measure V, we'd have to have an election on that, right?
Right. So what we're looking at doing is trying to receive provisional approval from Housing and Community Development until we're able to go for a vote along Measure V by the community, and that would be in 2022. That's the reason for the provisional approval.
I see. Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
And on the Mills Act house, I know that previously City Council had wanted to clear some stuff out before they heard any of those. I guess they're ready now to act on new Mills Act contracts?
Yes, we received compliance, receiving all annual reports from each of the properties, the existing Mills Act contracts.
And so this would be to add them to the Mills Act, or?
That would be to add them to the Mills Act. They're currently designated properties already.
Great.
And that concludes my report.
Well, I think that we can probably safely adjourn this meeting till the next regular meeting of the commission on November 19th. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.